Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody had a good weekend. This Monday is starting off to be a little weird. They did some changes to Zoom, and
Miss,
yes,
I wasn't able to take the test because I didn't have the code. Like, it wouldn't let me put in
right.
the code. It
You,
was just
you,
like,
you're
oh,
right,
you can't take the test.
and you're back, and I know that you need extra time. So let me put that for you in the chat. And I think I also need to change the date on that. Um, Give me 1 second to check the date, because even if I give you the code, it still might be closed. All right. So, folks, while we're waiting for everybody to come in, like I said, today's kind of a weird day. People are not being able to access things, and Zoom is acting weird. And so, hopefully, you can get to Canvas. We're starting introduction of cells. So, please look at that. Go to Canvas and look at the new module, cell structure and transport overview. Start with vocabulary, and you'll notice there's a lot of vocabulary. We're going to look at cells, and there's a lot of parts to the cell. So you're going to need to make sure you keep up, because this one you have to know. Like I said, the macromolecules, that was easy. That was introductory stuff. Now we're getting into the meat of the matter. We're going to look at cells, what each cell does. We looked at macromolecule as a protein. Um, But now we're going to actually look at what the cell is doing to make the protein. So we're going to look at how yeah, it's close, how the DNA works. So we looked at macromolecule nucleic acids. So we're going to look at that again in more detail. We're going to look at its function, which is to make protein. So we're going to look at protein synthesis in detail, where the proteins are made in the cell, how they are made in the cell, all that good stuff. So please look at that introduction. Um, while I get Kiani. Oh, it's open until tomorrow. Okay, so I don't have to change that. Actually, let me go ahead and change the late too, because otherwise it'll mark it late, and we don't want it to do that. Alrighty. So, have I posted what yet? That's a good question. Let me check. All right. Kiani, it is open. I put the link in the chat, so you're good for that. And you're right. Is it published? Is a good question. And it is not. Thank you for telling me that. All righty. There we go. Oh, come on. Okay. Take that out. Take this out. Okay, so now it's published. Now it's published. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so again, you're going to be looking at cell transport. The next module is the cell and cell transport. And I wanted you to look at the overview, look at the vocabulary while we're waiting for folks to sign in. They're almost all here. Now, the other thing that has gone weird on me is sharing. And It's not giving me the drop down thing where I can stop sharing. So we'll see what happens in a second. I think they've changed it to share my screen. So let me see something. If I click that out, I go back to, all right, but now I need to get this back. So yeah, everything has changed. I've learned all the new formats. So now I have to look at my screen. All right, so is this sharing for you? Yes, you can just kind of shake your head up and down. I'll see you. Okay, thank you. Tiziana, the only person shaking their head. All right, waiting on one more person. Okay, so I'm learning the new system. All right, so take a few minutes to look at that. Yeah. And I need to go from this side. I think this first one, she's not saying very much. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Created using Powtoon.
Oh, I know you're so excited about this. All right, but you will be. Shells are interesting. All right, so the first thing they do is, if you remember, we talked about the organization of life. And we started off with macromolecules just being molecules, but they're not part of anything. And then if we put all these molecules together, we actually create a unit called the cell. And we are going to end up defining it, as you see here, as the basic unit of not only life, but of structure and function for all living things. It's going to be important that you learn the cell theory and understand that, because this is going to help you decide whether something is living or non-living. So they have decided that something is living if one is made up of cells, and two, they are the basis of the structure and function of that individual. Okay, in other words, we're going to look at a corkscrew. The cork that you have in a wine bottle or something, and they have cells, but they're not living. And we're going to talk about why there's a difference between that and what a living cell. Okay, and mostly our discussion in this unit is going to be about the organelles. So we're going to go inside the cell and look at all the parts of the cell what they do. We're going to do a little something with the microscope so that we can actually look at microscopic things, because the cell is so small, it's invisible to the naked eye. So we need a help. We need to look at microscopes, and there are different kinds of microscopes. The cells do different things when you put them in water. So we're going to learn about hypertonic, hypotonic, and isotonic cells. And we talked a little bit about water being the universal solvent, because everything can dissolve in water. So we're going to look at the difference between a solute and a solvent. All right, so keep in mind this vocabulary list is here, so that you need to look at each one of those. All right, so up here we're going to go from looking at what is the cell in general, what is the basic structure, then we're going to look at each type of organelles, and then how things, specifically the cell membrane, and how things pass through the cell membrane so that all these organelles can do their job. Okay. All righty. So what I'm going to do, oh, there it is up there. It's switched pages on me. I don't know why this is over here. I cannot make it go back over there. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it right there for now. All right, let's see. All right, we're going to get a brief introduction by the Amoeba sisters.
If you had to think back about the most exciting day you ever had in a science classroom, which day would that be? Now, looking back through the years, we have a few. The time we participated in an earthworm dissection, the time we took apart an owl pellet, the osmosis eggs, all of the fruit flies and genetic experiments. Oh, I could go on. But I will never forget one day in my 9th grade science class. My teacher brought in pond water, and I put one drop of pond water on a microscope slide and saw the most amazing thing ever. I saw an amoeba. A single-celled amoeba on that microscope slide, and I was forever stuck on science from that point on. Because I could not believe that this little cell was there, alive on this slide, still eating, because that's what amoebas do a lot. But to imagine that every person is actually made of billions of cells. Of course, not amoeba cells, but animal cells. Billions of animal cells. That's fascinating. In fact, it really makes you reflect on some of the incredible statements of the modern cell theory. The modern cell theory includes the following. First, that the cell is the smallest living unit in all organisms. And second, that all living things are made of cells, one or more cells. The amoeba I observed was a single-celled organism, so unicellular. Humans are made of many cells, so multicellular. And third, all cells come from other pre-existing cells. You know, cells have their own little world inside them. They carry genetic information, they can divide, many have functions and processes that their organelles, structures inside them, can take care of. On our planet, we can divide cells into 2 major groups. As a cell, you're either a prokaryote or a eukaryote. Bacteria and archaea are prokaryotes, but everything else, plants, animals, fungi, protists, are eukaryotes. Both prokaryotes and eukaryotes have genetic material. Both have cytoplasm. Both have ribosomes, which are small organelles that make protein. Both have cell membranes, which control what goes in and out of the cell. But what makes them different is a big deal. Prokaryote, the pro rhymes with no, and they have no nucleus, which holds the genetic material and controls the cell's activities. Prokaryotes have no membrane-bound organelles. Membrane-bound organelles are fancy organelles like the nucleus and mitochondria and Golgi apparatus. Eukaryotes, the U rhymes with do, they do have membrane-bound organelles. So now you may be wondering, well, what do the organelles do? What are their functions? Well, you know our style. We love our science with a side of comics. So we want to take you on a tour of the ride of your life into the inside of a cell. Now, to start our trip, we're going to have to get through this cell membrane, also called a plasma membrane. It's selectively permeable, which means that it'll only let certain select materials in and out. But by doing so, it keeps things in the cell stable, also known as keeping homeostasis. And we have an entire video on just the membrane itself, which is found in all cells. But for now, we're just going to have to squeeze through this protein in the membrane. Now, inside the cell, we find ourselves in this jelly-like material called cytoplasm. It surrounds all these internal cell structures, and you'll find it inside both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Now, organelles that are floating around in the cytoplasm can have more support than you might think. Cells contain a cytoskeleton, which is a collection of fibers that can provide support for the cell and its organelles. And the cytoskeleton can even play a major role in cell movement. The cytoskeleton actually deserves its own video because it's very complex and its organization can vary depending on what kind of cell you're looking at. Moving through the cytoplasm, let's start with ribosomes. They are not membrane-bound organelles, and they're going to be in both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. They make protein, which is really important because that's what so much of genetic material, DNA, codes for, protein. Ribosomes can be free in the cytoplasm, but they can be attached to another organelle too, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We're now going to focus on organelles that will be membrane-bound. So we're going to be focusing on organelles that you would find in a eukaryote cell. This takes our travel to the big boss, the nucleus. Now in eukaryotes, it holds the genetic material. Genetic material as in DNA, for example. Both prokaryotes and eukaryotes have DNA, but if you're a eukaryote, you have a nucleus to put it in. And the nucleus controls the cell's activities, and inside it, it has a nucleolus, which is where ribosomes can be produced. Attached to the membrane of the nucleus, or nuclear membrane, you will find the endoplasmic reticulum, ER for short. It does a lot of processing of molecules for the cell, like protein folding, and it's highly involved in actually transporting those molecules around, like a highway. There's a rough ER, which has ribosomes attached to it, making it, as you can imagine, rough, and then smooth ER, which doesn't have the ribosomes. Rough ER specifically tends to be involved with protein producing and transporting, because remember that ribosomes make protein. Now, molecules that leave the ER can be sent away in vesicles that actually pinch off the ER themselves. Now, smooth ER has many additional roles, including detoxification, which is one reason why your liver cells tend to have a lot of smooth ER. And another additional role of smooth ER is that it can make some types of lipids. Next, the Golgi apparatus. It's the ultimate packaging center. It can receive items from the transport vesicles that pinched off the ER. It has enzymes that can modify molecules it may receive and sorts the material it receives as well. It can determine where to send those molecules, including some that may eventually be sent to the membrane, so they can be secreted, which means items that can be sent out of the cell. So with all that's going on in here, you might start to wonder, what's powering this thing? The mighty mitochondria, or mitochondrion, if you're just talking about one. They're like power plants. The mitochondria make ATP energy in a process called cellular respiration. Now, it's not the type of power plant that you might think of. It runs on glucose, which is a sugar, and it needs the presence of oxygen to efficiently make ATP energy. Now, at this point, we need to mention that eukaryotes are not a one-size-fits-all. Animal cells can have differences from plant cells. We have a fork in the road here. For example, plant cells not only have mitochondria, but they can also have these awesome organelles called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts actually make glucose by using light energy in a process known as photosynthesis. They tend to even have a green look to them because they have a pigment that captures the light energy and it reflects green light. Now, both plant and animal cells can have vacuoles. Now, vacuoles can have a lot of different functions, but many types act as storage of materials. Plant cells can have one large vacuole called a central vacuole, while animal cells can have smaller several vacuoles. Now, remember how we already said that all cells have membranes? They do. But plant cells additionally can have a cell wall, which is a layer that offers additional protection and shape maintenance that animal cells do not. Okay, now how do we get out of this animal cell that we've been in? Well, we could get out like a protein would. So if we were a protein, we would only be made because of instructions from DNA. And remember that in eukaryotes, DNA is found in the nucleus. We would be made by a ribosome because ribosomes make protein. The ribosomes could be attached to the rough ER, and the rough ER highway would provide a vesicle to send us to the Golgi apparatus where sorting can take place. And if we're tagged for being secreted, we could be sent off through a vesicle from the Golgi to the membrane. Out we go! Now just keep in mind that in our quick tour, there are still so many more awesome organelles found in lots of different types of eukaryote cells to continue exploring, so to the Google for more. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
All right, so we're not going to Google, we're going to Canvas. But that was an overview as well. So we're going to take each one of those organelles and we're going to look at them individually. We started the year off talking about Ms. Gren and the things that all living things must do. That includes the cell. The cell has to do all of those things. Anybody remember what Ms. Gren? It's 5 points for somebody who can type in what Ms. Gren stood for. And you got to remember what Ms. Gren. You remember? Way back at the beginning, we started off with an acronym. And each one of the letters of Ms. Gren started with a function that all living things have to do. You don't know. Anybody know? Well, you don't have to type, I don't know. Okay. All right, Isaiah, you're excused. So pay attention, Isaiah, because everybody needs to know this. Let me see if I can find it for y'all. I'll stop sharing for a minute while everybody thinks about it. Yeah, dots. All right. Nobody remembers Ms. Gren? All right, for Isaiah's sake, we're going to let me look at your playlist because we got one in the playlist.
Know it. I know it.
What is it?
Movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrient.
Excellent, excellent. And I have no idea who was talking just now.
That's me.
Okay, Keone, I thought you were doing the test.
I finished the test.
Oh, great. All right, did you hear what he said? Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. I'm going to pull it up real quick and not really show the video, but get your playlist, you got. All right, and Isaiah, you need to know that there is a playlist for your class. If you go to your playlist, the video we just watched is on there. Macromolecules, all of that good stuff. Oh, Miss Gren, the first one on the list. That was the first thing we talked about. As soon as I get rid of this commercial.
Have you ever wondered what makes something alive? Why is a sunflower dancing in the garden considered? Know the energy, matter and change, where every living thing contributes to the harmony of the ecosystem. Life is truly a wonder.
Back to that picture that he had.
Section 11. Go on. Be a life detective. Now that you know the secrets of Mrs. Gren, it's time to put on your detective hats and explore the world around you. Can you the awesome things they do, like moving, growing organism from the tiniest area, wiggle and jiggle under a microscope. Movement is all about listen closely. You'll be amazed by the backyard, at the park, or even time to put on your to the harmony helps us understand. It is a perfect example of between the living and the non-living. Without these processes, life as we know it wouldn't exist. Remember the sunflower and the rock? One is full of life, the other is not.
Hi everyone, so today we're going to talk about biological macromolecules. So let's
I
get
was trying
Hi
trying
everyone,
to
so
get
today
that
we're going to
pic-
talk about
Ah,
biological mac
the picture.
Hi everyone, so today
They give you a picture and then they don't.
Have you ever wondered?
I give up. Okay, I'm gonna come out of this for a sec.
Have you ever wondered what makes something alive? Why is a sunflower dancing in the garden considered alive, but a shiny rock is not? It's a real head scratcher, right? Well, fear not, young detectives of science. We have a secret agent on the case, ready to unlock the mysteries of life itself. Get ready to meet the amazing Mrs. Gren. Mrs. Gren isn't your average secret agent. She doesn't wear a trench coat or carry a magnifying glass, though a microscope is more her style. Instead, Mrs. Gren is a secret code, a set of incredible abilities that all living things share. Each letter in her name stands for a characteristic of life, a clue that helps us crack the code of what it means to be alive. Are you ready to decode Mrs. Gren with me? Let's dive in. The first secret Mrs. Gren wants to share is the power of movement. Now hold on before you say, but
All right. The picture that is on the front. They don't have that. While they advertise the video with it, they don't actually have it in the movie, in the video, which is what I was looking for. Anyway, that picture right there. So you need to write down the acronym. So if you forgot, write the acronym down, Ms. Gren, and you need to write down movement, respiration. And I wish I could make this bigger. All right, so the Ms part is movement, respiration, and sensitivity. And then you have the Gren part, which is growth. And then there's another R, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. So those are the letters of Miss Gren. So write that down somewhere. All right, so you as an individual need to be able to do all of that. However, we're going to talk about the fact that the cell, the basic unit of structure, has to be able to do all of that as well. Each cell has to be able to do that so that we all can function as an individual. What happens when we die a natural death? They're to the point where they cannot function and complete all of those activities, they die. And if enough cells die, then you start to stop functioning because you don't have enough cells to support life. And then that's what natural death is. Okay, where you're not really dying of some debilitating disease. And then some of them are, because that's what cancer is. Cancer is an overgrowth, out of control growth of cells in places where you don't want it to grow. And so we're going to look at the normal functioning of a cell, what each organelle is supposed to do. So you as an individual have organs, and each of your organs is responsible for different things. You have your digestive system has organs to it, and each one of those organs helps you digest. You have your nervous system, and we're going to look at the cells that, well, later on we're going to look at the human system, but there are cells in that system that make your sensitivity work well. You have your skin is a barrier. It functions like the cell membrane functions. And so we're going to look at all of the different things that we just talked about, movement, how the cells move. Some move differently. You know, plants, we don't think about plants as moving around, but they do move. They respond to stimulus, which is what the S stands for, sensitivity. they respire. All living things respire. So we're going to look at which organelle is responsible for respiration. And then we're going to look at which organelle is responsible for growth. And we're going and in growth, we're talking about proteins, making proteins, so you can add more tissue. We're going to look at which organelles are responsible with reproduction. So how does the cell reproduce? And then we're going to look at which organelle, like he said in the video, there's one organelle that is what we call the energy factory, the powerhouse of the cell. So it's very, very important. And then we're going to look at and nutrition. How does the cell feed itself? Okay, so things go in and out of the cell. So there's a whole process of going in and out. So we're going to look at that as well. All right, so let's look at this first. C is for compartments. And again, if we look what Robert Hooke looked at, he is kind of like the first person to discover the word cell or apply the word cell to things. But he was looking at a corkscrew or thin layers of cork cells. And one, they are a plant cell because the cork comes from a tree. And what he was actually looking at was empty cells because the cork, everything in the cork had died already. So he compared them to the cell in a prison, little boxes empty with nothing in them. So when you see what is Robert Hooke, that's what he saw. So, but the name cell stuck, so we still call everything a cell. The cell theory, all organisms, the cell is the basic unit of all living things, the building blocks. They perform all the life functions like I just saw, and they are basically the most important thing for building protein. So we grow because the cell provides us with all of that. All righty. She's just going to make a lot of noise, so we're going to ignore her. All right. So these are the main things. And this is very basic, all cells, because we're going to look at later on that bacteria, they don't have all the organelles that we have in our cells, but they will have a cell membrane. They will have the jelly that's inside called cytoplasm. They will have DNA because DNA is the boss. It gives instructions for everything. Okay, and ribosomes are necessary for energy. Nothing goes on without energy. If you have no energy, you don't function. So the same thing in a cell. All right, so let's look. I'm gonna give you a chance to flip through this first one. I'm gonna do attendance. So please go through and read this first box. And then we're gonna look at the different types of cells. And you need to be able to drag these. So after you look at this, you need to be able to do this. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing so I can do attendance. I'll be right back. So you read that. If you finish reading that, do the matching and then go to the next unit because that's what we're going to do. All right. So again, what you are doing right now is reading that one slideshow presentation and doing the matching activity at the bottom of that unit. Attendance won't take long. I think there's only one person absent. And folks, I shouldn't go to GoGuardian and see that somebody has been idle for 24 minutes. That's like not being here. In my book, that's not being here. It means you logged in and you I thought Isabella was here. I guess not. Mm. Okay. Yeah, I'm not doing a whole lot of stuff today other than Canvas because they did tell us that there's some issues with the Chromebooks. They're trying to work on that. I think it might have to do with some of these changes that they've made. Like I said, my whole Zoom uh, thing has changed the way it sets itself up. I can't even do a background anymore. So I had to blur my background. So there's some changes going on and they asked us to be patient. But I do want you to look at, okay. So if you haven't gone through this, so we are going to look at the microscope, the cell under the microscope. So when we actually look at cell structure, we have to remember, even though our pictures are going to be huge, you have to remember that this is something that you have to put under the microscope in order to see what we're talking about. Okay, so they are microscopic. That means they're naked, invisible to the naked eye. And they are very, very important to interacting with everything in the environment. Okay. And then this one just talks about how they're small. We're going to talk about surface area because surface area later when we talk about this cell membrane is going to determine how much material gets inside the cell and how much has to stay outside the cell. All right, so we're going to also look at the fact that some organisms actually are only one cell big. So those are unicellular organisms, and their whole being is one cell, and they have to perform all of the functions that we just talked about. So even though they are one cell big, they still carry on all of the life functions. All right, then we have the multicellular organisms that are composed of 2 or more cells working together. So that's us. We are multicellular. We have cells that work together in groups, and they group their functioning to a particular task. So like we have skin tissue, and its skin tissue doesn't look like kidney tissue, it doesn't look like heart tissue, because they all have different functions, but they're all made of cells, and the cells within those tissues are going to look a little different, but they still have to do all of the life functions that we talked about. Okay, so we are multicellular. All right, then we can divide this into what we call prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and these would make cells are classified as whether they have a nucleus in their center, and that means a structured nucleus. We're still going to have DNA, but some of these organisms have their DNA in a structure called a nucleus, and the nucleus has a membrane around it, and all the DNA stays within that membrane. Then you have organisms that have DNA, but there's no nucleus, so the DNA is kind of floating all over the cell. So our prokaryotes are the ones that do not have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles, but they have organelles, and they have DNA, and they're just kind of floating around in the cytoplasm. Whereas a eukaryote, again, we have eukaryotic cells. They have a membrane around almost everything. The nucleus and the DNA is inside the nucleus and never leaves. And then all the other material, all the other organelles are held inside the cell by a cell membrane. Okay, so there's 2 kinds of cells, those that have a definite nucleus, and it's usually central, or those that do not. Okay. All right. Let's see what this joker has to say.
All vertebrates start the same way, as one fertilized egg cell. The egg will divide and form new cells. And these divide to form more cells over and over. At first, an embryo's development seems chaotic. It soon begins taking on exquisite order. Fields of cells fold and slide over each other. These cells are gathering in a long line and rolling into a tube. This is the beginning of a spinal cord. Cell differentiation has taken place. Other cells are becoming heart cells and are forming a primitive beating heart. Each cell is ordered by a genetic program to form organs, limbs, tissue, to construct a body plan. At these early stages of embryonic development, it's hard to tell whether this is a chick, a frog, or a human being. Here, bumps on the limb develop into feathers, and as the chick outgrows its space and food supply, it is time to hatch.
All right, a lot of these clips are taken from a whole video, and so they kind of stop abruptly. But that is just to show that word, vocabulary word, differentiation. So cells differentiate, they become different, specialized to do the job that we were talking about before. All right, so hopefully you took the time to do this one. A cell that lacks a nucleus is a prokaryote. A cell that has a nucleus is a eukaryote. And whoops, didn't want to stay. There we go. And an organism composed of more than one is multis. Okay, let's stay. Well, that one doesn't want to stay in there. Anyway, that's the last answer, multicellular. Hopefully yours stayed. Mine is not. All right, so we need to know the cell theory. The cell theory is a real thing. And this is it. The 3 steps of the cell theory are all living things are composed of 1 or more cells. Cells come from pre-existing cells is the way this used to be phrased. In other words, cells don't just pop up out of the ooze, as some theories like to say, that a cell has to be created from another cell. And we're going to talk about how that happens. And then the cell is the basic unit of structure and function for all living things. And that means, again, that the cell is responsible for doing all the Miss Gren activities. There's 2 types of cells, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, those with a nucleus, those without. And a stem cell is undifferentiated cell that becomes a number of other different things. Okay, so that's going to be important as far as, like I said, we start off as one single celled organism, and we're going to talk about that when we do reproduction. And then that cell divides and it divides, but within that, some of the cells becomes, like they said, spinal cord, some of the cells become bones, some of the cells become intestines. They all have a different differentiation. All right, let's look at the next. All right, so we're going to start with the outside and work our way in. All right, so the cell membrane is often referred to as the gatekeeper of the cell. It means, and I always refer to the cell membrane like the screen on your Windows. Your screen on your Windows has little tiny holes. And if you threw a bucket of water at the screen, the water would go through. But if there was anything, dirt and rocks and all that sort of thing in the bucket, that would not go through. All right, so it lets some things in if they're small enough to go through the holes, and it keeps larger things out. That's what the cell membrane does. It regulates what goes into the cell. It takes in what it needs. It spits out what it doesn't need. And in that way, it is able to maintain the life of the cell.
One of the most important and complex structures of the cell is its outer boundary, known as the cell or plasma membrane. The cell membrane serves 2 main functions. It protects the internal parts of the cell, and it regulates which substances enter and exit. The cell membrane is selectively permeable, restricting the flow of traffic into and out of the cell.
So that's a vocabulary. And again, the vocabulary list is going to be really important. So selectively permeable is a word you're going to have to remember. And that permeable means it lets things in, lets materials pass through it. Selectively permeable is like what I was explaining with your screen. It lets some things in and keeps some things out. Okay, so it doesn't let everything in, but that's a vocabulary word you're going to have to remember.
Specific molecules into and out of the cell to specific molecules. It, in essence, acts as a gatekeeper. The cell membrane consists of phospholipid molecules and proteins. A closer look at a phospholipid molecule reveals that it is composed of a hydrophilic or water-seeking head and a hydrophobic or water-repelling tail. The phospholipid molecules that make up the cell membrane are in constant motion. Proteins that help make up the cell membrane perform several important tasks, including transporting molecules into and out of the cell. Some proteins act as small pumps, actively transporting molecules from one side of the membrane to the other.
Okay, so the selectively permeable means, like they said, a gatekeeper, like the security guard. You have to have the right structure and the right information in order for some of these little gatekeepers to let you pass through the cell membrane. Other than that, it's going to keep everything out that it does not need. All right, so again, it is the outer boundary. Sometimes it's called the plasma membrane because the gel inside is cytoplasm or cellular plasma. So it can be called the plasma membrane. And when we were talking about macromolecules, we talked about the lipid having a top part, oh gosh, the layer that's attracted to hydrophobic and hydrophilic. There you go. The words just left my head. All right, so it has two ends of it, hydrophobic and hydrophilic. Phobic always means you're scared of something or avoiding something. So, and hydro is water. So we have the bilipid layer, and then this one is going to talk about that. So we talked about this on our chart. We have a picture of it on our macromolecule chart, and we referred to it too as something that was going to be in our cell membranes. So we had all these pictures already. Okay. I had something that was in the I was trying to pause it and it wouldn't let me pause. Now I'm trying to not make it so big. And then my screen just froze. Okay. All right, I had to start it over in order to make it disappear. Okay, but what I wanted you to look at was this part. All right, so again, being a semi-permeable means it allows some things to pass through and others. Another name for the cell membrane is a fluid mosaic model. So we're going to be looking at what they mean by the fluid mosaic model. The fact that cell membranes are not box shaped or solid circle, they actually kind of flow like fluid. So that's why they call it a fluid. And it's actually floating on top of the cytoplasm. So it kind of has some fluidity to it. All right. And this picture down here. So I'm going to give you a picture like this, and it's going to be, and we're going to label all of these parts. So this is actually the picture of the cell membrane. And let's see. Okay, you're going to be able, all right. So we are going to take a minute, you try, and then I'm going to give you a copy that has all the right answers in it. But you're going to, so you should be able to label some of them. Let me see what the answer key does. Oh, it downloads. So we don't want that one. All right, so just take a few minutes to, we only have a few more minutes to class. So take a few minutes to see how well you can drag some of these things into place. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look at, and then do this one. And I'm going to check to see if I already loaded a picture, a labeled picture, because you do have to know how to label that. Yep, there it is. All right. There it is. It's already in your module. So if you go to the next slide in your module, you will have a labeled diagram. All right? It's already in there for you. So study it and then go back and quiz yourself. After you study this, go back, hit the previous button and see if you can where are we? All right, see if you can do this one without cheating. And you're just going to take the words and you're going to drag them into place next to the lines that are sticking up. Okay. Drag and drop. So again, scroll down, hit next, and you'll actually have the labeled picture. And just kind of glance through that and then go back and try to label it by yourself. All righty. I'm going to stop sharing, let you get a chance to work on that. And again, do the last wrap-up review at the bottom when you're finished. The multiple choice cell membrane challenge before you go. Make sure you look at that. And again, vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. A lot of vocabulary with this. Just looking at that diagram should tell you that there's a lot of vocabulary with this unit. So we are going to look at all those structures in oh, cool. Okay. That good, Isaiah? Okay. All right. So what time is good for you? Okay, tomorrow. Okay, yeah. Because I thought tomorrow is set aside for that time. So that's good. Today you have Spanish, right? Tomorrow you have. Okay, not a problem. I'll be here. All right, folks. If you're good, I'm good. We'll see you Wednesday. I am loading. So there is a website that's already in the module that you can kind of play around with called Cells Alive. So I'm uploading the assignment and the worksheets that go with that website. And we're going to look at actually labeling the parts of a cell for both the plant and animal. All right, so that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to, by the time you come back on Wednesday, I'll have that uploaded for you. But the link for Cells Alive is already in the module. So if you want to take a peek at that, see how that works, you can do that. All right, that being said, you all have a great rest of your day.